As a candidate, are you going to be able to tell the teachers union that maybe, although they deserve a pension, but maybe their pension is a little bit too generous, especially when you compare that to the private sector?
I think people make the comparison to the private sector a lot of the time, and this is something I've actually spent a lot of time looking at over my time in Springfield and now. And the average teacher's pension, although there are some that are outsized, particularly for some administrators, get some very large and inappropriately large, in my view, pensions. But I think the average teacher pension is really more like 30, in the mid 30,000 in terms of what teacher retirees are currently getting.
Well, it's 70. If they're there for the 30 years, they get 75%.
But when you look at what, if you were to look at the average, the state, I looked at it a couple weeks ago, and I unfortunately don't have the number at the top of my mind, but it's in the mid 30s in terms of what the average benefit is. And I think you also have to step back and realize that. So, my friend Becky, who became a teacher up in Round Lake, when I graduated, she went and became a teacher, and she received a significantly lower salary than people did who went to work in the private sector, and she paid more into her retirement than other people who are in the private sector paid into their retirement. I think when you put it all together, it's something like 10% of the salary when you put all the sources going in. Many young people her age who go to the private sector don't put anything in. And so the trade-off that we make these teachers, you give us more of your salary to pay for your pension. You stay in one place, unlike the private sector where it's quite frequent that people move between jobs. You stay employed in this line of work, and you make your pension contributions, and we're going to support you. So I wish that I think the other thing actually is that defined contribution plans are cheaper to administer. The problem is that you transfer the risk from the individual to the employer. Right? The employer has the risk if they fail to pay their fair share. But as an individual basis, it's cheaper to provide a benefit as a defined contribution because you don't have the bookkeeping expenses, you don't have the individual management expenses, you're not paying you pay lower consulting fees. So I support providing them those benefits.
Yeah, but what they have right now is a defined benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and if if you were to take the actuarial value of a pension, and teachers at Evanston High School are making $75,000, $85,000 a year, and if you take the actuarial value of their pensions, you're talking somebody in the private sector would have to have probably close to $1 million in the bank to be able to generate $70,000 or $60,000 a year. All that is being picked up by the Evanston taxpayer. Okay, I mean, because the Evanston taxpayer has to fund in 202 and 65. So, and the basis of their funding is a mandate that they receive. Whatever they have to fund is from the state, because the state decides what the teachers are going to get, not the local school districts, as far as I understand it. So, we know that the school teachers are a major interest group down in Springfield, and we know that you and others have. Most candidates that come out of our district have a strong interest in education and wanting education to be strong. But what I see is that somebody in the legislature at some point has to say to some very good people, I agree with you, the teachers are good. They have to say to them, look, there's only so much we could afford, and that's the issue. That's what's not being answered in Springfield, because the reality is that everybody wants their share. The firemen want their pensions, the policemen want theirs, the teachers want theirs, and somebody's got to pay for it. And there's only two ways to go. You either have to raise taxes, or you have to cut something. And when the mandate comes from the state legislature to the various local bodies, this is what you have to pay in pension benefits, go raise the money, it's tough. And then it ultimately ends up raising property taxes, because the local governments in education are primarily funded by that. So would you contemplate, let's say somebody came to the table and said, well, we've got the teachers who are there now, and we're paying them, if they're in for 30 years, 70% of their final salary. Maybe in the future with the new employees, we can only pay 50%. Is that an idea that may have a little bit of traction on your end of the table?
I think at the end, I'm hopeful. I worked on a reauthorization of a teacher's retirement insurance program. And we sat down with the teachers' unions, and we sat down with representatives of school districts, and we sat down with everybody, and we came to a negotiated agreement to extend the benefit, the retirement health insurance benefit. And teachers paid a little more, school districts paid a little more, the state paid a lot more at that time. There were some benefits changes. So I support coming to the table and saying, okay, what can we do to address this? But stepping back, providing a defined benefit, if you pay as you go, now we haven't paid as we gone. We owe teachers, retired teachers, billions of dollars into the pensions. But if you pay as you go, it's cheaper than doing a defined contribution plan because you don't have those administrative costs. But you have to meet your obligations in order for that to work. So, I'm committed to making benefits that make sense. There's also, and I'm committed to working with the teachers' unions, and I've worked with them on a lot of issues across the table, next to them, in different roles. But I think the fundamental premise is that I believe that I think if this last economic downturn has taught us something, it should be that we don't want everybody's livelihood tied to the ups and downs of the market. And we benefit as an economy if there's a group of people, particularly our retirees, who have a stable income stream.